You're 21 years old, you're looking for your second car, you want something that is fast, that has cheap insurance and doesn't cost you an absolute arm and a leg, under £10,000, what car are you buying? Well, I've done the research for you. I found 10 cars with reasonably good insurance on all of them without a black box for 21-year-olds. I've done my quote in a location that is very average for insurance. In fact, it's a little bit expensive on insurance, to give you 10 options for what you should go for. I actually did this video back in 2020, so I thought I would update it to today in 2023 to give you guys a much more realistic view of those 10 cars. Before we get into it, make sure you hit the like button. 1,000 likes with the same video again at under £5,000 instead if it's possible. Subscribe as well if you're new here. Without further ado, let's get into the video. I think it's super important that at some point in every car person's life they own or at least experience a Golf GTI, given it is renowned as the car that popularised hot hatches, rightly or wrongly. And what better time to get into one than literally as only your second car at 21 years old. I managed to get a quote on a Mark 7 GTI from 2015 at £1,471, which is expensive, but at 21 for the performance, not that bad. It comes with a 2-litre turbocharged inline-4 engine that makes 216 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 6.3 seconds, so it's reasonably punchy, but more importantly in my books, it's a proper GTI with all the right features, including that tartan style interior, the more aggressive body and suspension setup, and GTI badging all around. These start at around the 10k mark, but there are plenty available at that price, so you'll likely be getting into a 2014 example with around 100,000 miles on it. Some early DSG cars did have auto box issues, and some timing chains were known to go, but outside of that it's a typical VW group car in that it's like oil consumption being particularly high and coil packs and that kind of stuff. Next up, it's another hot hatch, the 4th generation Renault Clio RS, which strangely dropped the manual gearbox in favour of a dual clutch automatic box. It was also the first Clio RS to have a turbocharger attached to its 1.6 litre inline-4 block that makes 197 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 6.5 seconds, slightly slower than the GTI. Despite that turbo and performance, I was still able to get an insurance quote at £1,380, which comes out at around £115 per month, which isn't too bad when you consider road tax isn't horrendous compared with some of the other cars on this list as well. Though it is a lovely little car with great performance, the only major benefit over the older gens for me is that it's newer, so it has a few more modern features, but to be honest, I would want to go for an older model to have a bit more fun with. These start at around the 10k mark as well, however, but mileage is still pretty reasonable at 60k. The two main problems with this car come firstly from that automatic transmission, and secondly from the fact that a lot of the car's parts are very specific to the RS, so it's more expensive to get replacement parts for. The Corsa VXR is a direct competitor to the Clio RS just mentioned, with its 1.6 litre turbocharged inline-4 engine that produces 202 brake horsepower, which will get it from 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, matching the RS. Considering the output is very similar to the Clio, the insurance quote I got is as well, at £1,293 per year, which is getting to be pretty reasonable, but wait until you see what else I've got waiting for you on this list. Despite Corsas not always having the best reputation, these are actually very well equipped, both for performance and comfort, with pretty much everything tailored to work for both, like the suspension, the seats, and the additional benefits you get if you grab a performance pack model like the Brembo brakes and LSD. These start at around the £8,000 mark, and for £10,000 you'll be looking at a 2014 model with around 35,000 miles on the clock. The Corsa VXR was known for problems with piston number 4, but these don't appear to have followed over to the Corsa E thus far. The gearbox too is known to be strong thanks to some upgrades from the D generation. The mini hatch is often referred to as a go-kart for the roads, and the JCW is essentially the most go-karty of the bunch, given it is built from factory with some incredibly strong parts that give it properly useful performance, particularly in terms of handling. The engine is pretty useful too, a 1.6 litre turbocharged inline-4 that makes 208 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 6.5 seconds, again matching the previous two cars. And insurance is ever so slightly cheaper per year than the Corsa, as I could find a quote at £1,274. It was based at least a little bit on the JCW Challenge race car, but it is really a Cooper S with more engine output and some additional features to make it a bit punchier, including that nice body kit, the larger brakes, the LSD, and a 6-speed manual that bangs through the gears. These are listed from around £6,000 at the bottom end, with 10k grabbing you a 2012 model with around 70,000 miles miles on the clock. Coil packs, carbon buildup, the high pressure fuel pump and the bypass valve are all known problems, but the key issue on older N14 R56 engine was the timing chain death rattle, which can be game over for the top end of your engine. We're on to one of my personal favourite cars on this list, the Mark V VW Polo GTI, but specifically the post 2014 facelift example, which came with the larger and far more reliable 1.8 litre turbocharged inline 4 block that produces 189 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 once again in 6.5 seconds. In fact, half the cars on this list get to 60 in that time, so they'd make for a great drag race. Insurance is decent too, as I managed to get a quote at £1,250 for a 21-year-old per year with no black box. I think this post facelift model is my favourite Polo GTI ever made. It's such a good looking car with its clean, aggressive angular lines, the more grown up alloys and interior, and overall just classic GTI package, especially when compared to the highly unreliable pre-facelift example. £9,000 around the minimum you'll pay to get into one of these, and 10k will get you a 2016 example with around 80k on it. That 1.8 is a much safer bet than the 1.4 twin charge block that the older examples had, and the manual gearbox alleviated some of the DSG problems, plus it could handle more torque, so if you go for a DSG example it will be more torque limited. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you are, a quick reminder, 1,000 likes, I'll make the same video again at under £5,000 to go, an even cheaper price range, and we've got a lot of cool stuff in store. In fact, the next video to come out after this one should be, I'm just saying because I haven't recorded it yet, but it should be sick, so make sure you're subscribed for that. I know a lot of you actually don't want hot hatchbacks as your second car and want to move to something away from the hatch style car class as you get a bit older, so next up we have a certified sports car, the Jaguar XKR, with its 4.2 litre supercharged V8 engine that makes 420 brake horsepower and will manage 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds, making it by far the most powerful and quickest car on the list. Despite this, is actually surprisingly cheap to insure, and my quote of £1,074 is not just a fluke, as I found similarly cheap insurance quotes for XKs and XKRs in the past. It's designed by the same man who did a few Aston Martins like the Vanquish, and you can definitely see those design principles coming out in this Jag. Yes, it's definitely not a car you expect a 21-year-old to be driving, but that shouldn't preclude you from getting one, and I know my good friend and fellow YouTuber Ewan is a big fan. These start at around £9,000, and for £10,000 you'll be looking at a high mileage example from 2008 still, but what a cool car to drive at 21 years old. They can have timing chain problems, though examples of it happening are few and far between. Again, like the GTI, the main complaints I could find on forums were around oil consumption. Just missing out on the top three, we have the Abarth 595, which in its punchiest spec will manage 7.1 seconds to 60 thanks to its 1.4 litre turbocharged inline 4, the smallest engine on the list, and the second slowest car on the list to 60. But it does have a pretty large fan base, which is why I found it quite surprising that I could get insurance prices without a black box starting at £1,048. Even if you're not into Abarth, you've got to accept how cool the wealth of specs are on these, and the multiple special editions, many of which are available within our price range. I'm particularly partial to Sebelt sport seats, some of which come carbon backed, though having driven a base 500 Abarth, I find the gear shifter location a little sketchy, but that's a preference thing, so feel free to ignore. You'll get into one of these from anywhere around the 6k mark, and for £10,000 you'll be looking at a 2012 one in top spec with 20k miles on it. There are a bunch of known electrical issues with these, mostly to do with the non-engine electrics, and there are also a bunch of known build quality issues as well. All in though, the engine is built to a good standard, so you'll likely be okay. That was the last hot hatch on the list, though the Octavia VRS also is listed as a hatchback, but it is actually a little bit more saloony in my books. It comes with the same engine as the Golf GTI mentioned at the start of the video, a 2 litre turbocharged inline 4 which puts out 216 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 6.6 seconds. So yes, it's 3/10 slower to 60 than the GTI, but it's significantly cheaper to insure, £500 cheaper to be exact, given it comes in at £971 per year. This is a third generation Octavia, and the VRS, known as the RS in other countries, is effectively Skoda's version of that Mark VII Golf GTI, given it's not just the engine, they also share the same platform and multiple other parts. It also comes as an estate, and as someone who had a Skoda estate as his first car, I would highly recommend going for a fast estate example of this, as it will set you apart from other drivers your age. £6,000 around the minimum you need to pay to get into one of these, and for £10,000 you get a 2014 example with around 100k on it. The reliability story is very similar to the Golf GTI, so I won't bang on about it, just know the standard VW group problems and you'll be grand. I wanted to try and get a classic into this video, the kind of car that would look good at pretty much any car show, turn heads out on the roads, and have a slightly more exotic exotic badge. The best I could do with a super cheap insurance quote is this, the Lotus Elan. It comes with a 1.6 litre inline-4 turbocharged engine that makes 165 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, matching all those cars I mentioned previously. But when it comes to insurance, it is a beast. I got a quote, remember, without a black box at 21 years old for £884 per year, which is so sick for a classic Lotus. You'll likely get an earlier model for your money, as the later ones are rarer and built by Bugatti. But this little entry-level Lotus gives you an MX-5-esque experience with a bit more of a prestigious badge attached, and you'd feel like a boss turning up to any car meet in one. These start at around £7,000, and for £10,000 you get a 1992 example with around 80,000 miles on the clock. The engine is known to be strong as well as it's serviced with regular oil changes. Remaps are pretty common as well, so make sure it's been done properly, and the transmission is also known to be strong. Instead, as it's an older car, look out for corrosion, particularly around the rear wishbones. Taking the top spot on this list is also the slowest car, which I suppose makes sense from an insurance perspective, the Mazda MX-5 ND, or the 4th generation MX-5. It's far more angular and aggressive than the previous generations, but maintains the same ethos as a roadster that is particularly focused on having exceptional handling. That's why you can forgive the slightly slower 0 to 60 time of 8 seconds, which comes as a result of that 1.5 litre inline-4 engine that makes just 129 brake horsepower, making it also the least powerful car on the list. But given its actual on-road and track performance, the insurance quote I got was a steal at £878, which is honestly very good at 21 for a little sports car like this. You won't get the RF for your 10k, but the convertible has really grown on me as a great looking little car for the money, and when I say little, it's both shorter and lighter than the previous generation, bucking the trend of cars getting bigger in time. You will not be sad in one of these, they are literally built to put a smile on your face when scorching around corners. These start at around the £9,000 mark, and for £10,000 you get yourself a 2015 model with around 40,000 miles on the clock. There have been some minor issues that should be fixed under warranty, and the automatic gearbox has had some problems, but outside of that, it's a solid car. And that brings the video to a close. Let me know in the comments down below which of those 10 cars you would have if it was your second car and you had the money for it. Massive thanks to the patrons always for their support, and to you guys as well for watching. But now that you've seen this video, you need to go and check out one other video, which is up here. You will find a video on why I didn't include the Audi TT in this list, because it's about to disappear from the market, and click down here to subscribe.